clicking on their streaming links and waiting for us to show up. Welcome to the first lecture on ARCH's 2022 Fun and Free Lecture Series. I'm Connie Haas-Zuber, the Executive Director of ARCH Inc. I am proud to welcome you to this lecture series again. And I'm also proud to welcome you to the lecture that I am giving this year. And I've had a great deal of fun doing the research and writing, getting it pulled together for you. Today's title is Edwin Gibson, A Distinguished Career Begins. That is the tamest description of what we're going to be learning today, because Edwin Gibson, to me now, is both a fascinating and admirable person, and his work that I've been able to learn about so far, because I'm continuing to learn about it, is just beautiful and distinguished for sure, and something really enjoyable to look at and think about. So let's move on. We start, of course, as always, with credits and thanks. This lecture is supported by an arts programming support grant from the Indiana Arts Commission, which in turn is supported by funding from the National Endowment for the Arts and Indiana state funding. ARCH's community education program is supported by Arch United of Greater Fort Wayne and the Community Foundation of Greater Fort Wayne. In addition, and very importantly, ARCH would not be able to create programming like this lecture series without the continuing support since 1975, when we were founded, of our members and donors. Thank you to all of these people. Moving on, this lecture uses photographs and information from that are stored in the Indiana Department of Historic Preservation and Archaeology's SHARD database, collected from historic property survey work done under contract with the state by ARCH and local historic preservationists working with us. This lecture also uses images and materials downloaded from Ball State University's Andrew Seeger Archive of the Built Environment. And special thanks are due to Alan and Maureen Grinsfelder, Dr. J. Rex Parent, and Charlotte Charay, who generously shared memories, information, and photographs during the research leading up to this lecture. The lecture will conclude with the traditional question and answers session, which is easy for the people here in the room because they just have to raise their hand and ask their question. For the people who are live streaming it, you will see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or on your screen someplace. I'm pretty sure it's at the bottom. Please use that to post your questions, and our computer moderator will relay them to me, and we'll get them added to the discussion. Thank you. Okay. ARCH's archive has an essay by two of my predecessors as executive director on architectural modernism in Indiana, specifically as it relates to residential designs. And that essay includes Edwin Gibson as an example, citing his 1949 design of an international/Usonian style home in Wildwood Park. So there's been some knowledge of him for quite a while. We will talk about that home today. But our larger purpose today is to address the reality that far too little attention, in my opinion, has been paid to the man who designed that home and other homes and buildings here as he began a remarkable and distinguished career. Fort Wayne should be proud to have played a foundational role in the career of Edwin A. Gibson, architect. This lecture is ARCH's first step to correct that lack of attention. My hope is that, as I have learned more than I believe possible to this point, I can learn more in the next few months so that when we create the Edwin A. Gibson resource page for our website later this year, it will be worthy of his legacy here and his overall career. First, let's learn about the man himself and his career. This is Mr. Gibson at a drafting table in the A.M. Strauss workroom. So let's talk about who Edwin Gibson was. Born June 2nd, 1925 in Cumberland, Maryland, Gibson came with his family to Indianapolis at a young enough age that his grade school education was at Indianapolis Public Schools. He graduated from Crispus Attucks High School. A special staff note added to his resume as part of his Indianapolis firm's promotional brochure notes that an Ohio college awarded him a full scholarship that he did not accept because he wanted to attend the University of Illinois Urbana School of Architecture, which he considered the top architecture program in the nation. This is as a high school senior. He'd already done the research and decided that. And he did just that. Gibson himself is no longer with us to tell us about his motivations, inspirations, and lessons learned throughout his life, given his death in November of 2011. So I am relying on what written material he left behind, now housed at the Ball State University Andrews Seeger Archive of the Built Environment, and the recollections of a fellow architect who worked with him at A.M. Strauss, Alan Grinsfelder. We start before Grinsfelder and Gibson met, but with one of Grinsfelder's insights about what makes a successful architect in mind. That insight involves the importance of a lifelong immersion in the arts and culture and a background as a competent, hopefully excellent student to deepen an architecture student's engagement with the course material and to enlarge the aesthetic understanding he or she can bring to the work. I will argue that it looks like Gibson likely had a good grounding in both respects. We'll start with his academic credentials. He was without question an excellent student. We have the evidence of the full scholarship offer, plus the testimony of his Indianapolis staff in the promotional brochure that he graduated from U of I in the top 5% of his class, earning his bachelor's degree in 3 years. U of I is, by the way, and has been a top architecture school. His 2 degrees, bachelor's and master's, are in architectural engineering. The school has a long history of enrolling and graduating a diverse group of students, Blacks, women, Asians. More than 100 Black architects have been U of I graduates, including its first Black graduate, who went on in 1905 to found the Tuskegee Institute's architecture department and to design several of that campus's buildings before returning to Chicago, where he had a successful career after becoming Illinois' first Black registered architect. So that school's commitment to diversity goes way back. The lifelong immersion with arts and culture is a more challenging assertion to make. But the tone and passion of the dedication to his master's thesis certainly identifies his mother, Mary, as an extraordinary influence on his young life. I'll read it to you. Dedicated to Mrs. Mary Irby Gibson, my mother, whose untiring efforts and relentless sacrifices have made a distant dream a reality. So it looks like Mary was an extraordinary influence on his young life. And mothers often represent a commitment not only to being a good student, but also to the joy of learning about the arts and culture. Alan Grinsfelder shares my sense that Gibson must have had parents who gave him this crucial background. Gibson's thesis, titled 6,000 Years of Remarkable Stone Masonry by E. Arthur Gibson on its title page, is written, interestingly, like literature rather than engineering analysis, which seems like evidence of his cultural background to me. Each of its different sections begins with one of these beautiful hand-lettered letters. And this one starts out, scattered over the mountainous terrain of Peru can be found the Western Hemisphere's contribution to remarkable stone masonry. For it is in Peru where many centuries ago, ancient Indian tribes dwelled in the glorious splendor of the land that such examples remain. Living between the fertile land and the glorious sun, the civilization of Tiwanaku, 100 BC to 1100 AD, and Cuzco, 1100 AD to 1200 AD, flourished and expanded until, as all civilizations have done, they dwindled away, leaving only the glorious past in ruins. I think that's pretty eloquent writing. And his whole thesis has that lilt and artistry to it. His University of Illinois education undoubtedly familiarized him with the history of architecture, if he hadn't already learned about it while he was deciding to become an architect and learning enough to select U of I as his school of choice. His professors had designed buildings on campus in colonial revival and classical revival styles, so we know he was exposed to expertise in those realms. But all of the graduate architects from before his years and after that the school now claims as distinguished alumni are modernists. So that influence had to have been present as well. Gibson's career began at what was actually a not very auspicious time for architecture and the construction industry. He accepted his bachelor's degree and began his master's work in 1945 the year that first Germany and finally Japan surrendered to end World War II, which had effectively stopped construction in the United States as all resources were devoted to the war effort. As the soldiers began to return home, the most pressing construction need was for housing for them and their new families, not the work usually done by graduates of architecture schools. But he stayed on course, accepting his master's degree in February 1946, while he was working in Indianapolis as a draftsman for Ayers, Kingsbury, and Ward, a job his resume explains was part-time while attending school. But in October 1946, A.M. Strauss, Inc. in Fort Wayne hired the young architect as a designer. And he began a 17-year era of his career that left Fort Wayne with some remarkable buildings. He became an Indiana certified architect by examination on December 12, 1946. This is his certificate, which is in the Ball State Archive. I will point out that this signature right there definitely says Pohlmeyer on it, and I believe the third name is either Mock or Martin, and that was another distinguished Fort Wayne architect, a statue who could have been on this board as A.M. Strauss was at one point too. So I think it's kind of cool that a local architect would have signed his certificate. So that's 1946. In 1958, the firm promoted him to project architect and treasurer, and he became a partner in the firm. It was announced with a story in the Journal-Gazette, at least one. He stayed at Strauss until February 1963, when Governor Matthew Welsh appointed him to be Director of Public Works, Department of Administration for the state of Indiana, basically the state architect, and he returned to Indianapolis, where he spent the rest of his successful and busy career. He had already attracted politicians' attention while he was in Fort Wayne. Mayor Paul Mike Burns had appointed him to the Fort Wayne Board of Zoning Appeals in 1960 and asked him to serve on the Apartment Planning Study Commission in 1962. He had received the Governor's Award for Outstanding Achievement in September of 1962. Alan Grinsfelder met Gibson when the elder architect was already in full stride in his Strauss years. Grinsfelder was hired by Strauss in 1960 when he was about 2 years out of school, and his first employer was no longer able to pay him. Gibson became his mentor. Alan told me, I worked directly with him. He mentored me. It was good. He helped me meet clients. He would review the work I would do and offer suggestions. He was a very kind and laid-back person. Grinsfelder remembers Gibson's personal design style as largely international, with a little influence from Frank Lloyd Wright. Grinsfelder reasons that Strauss would have hired Gibson because, and this is a quote, he was looking for something different. And this would really point out the difference of the firm. And he was a talented person too. Black architects are rare today, and they were rare in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s too. Gibson was the only Black student in his class at U of I. Grinsfelder, who studied the scarcity of Black architects while doing graduate studies at IPFW, attributes the scarcity to the prevailing discrimination in the construction and architectural fields. Gibson obviously was aware of his role as a rarity in architecture. That special staff note after his personal resume and the promotional brochure for his Indianapolis firm pushed his achievements rather more aggressively than the standard resume, concluding with, quote, he was the first Black to become a registered architect in the state of Indiana by examination. Less than 3% of the registered architects in the United States are Black. Gibson owns 80% of the stock in Ed Gibson and Associates, Inc., which is the only minority-owned architecture firm in the state of Indiana. Gibson has made a profession of being first rather than being Black. Hard work, talent, high ethics, and professionalism have won him respect and admiration from all races. His staff wanted people to know that. But it did not win him a home in one of the Fort Wayne neighborhoods where the homes he designed were built. The first home he and his wife Mary lived in was at 427 LaSalle Street, now lost to blight and demolished. Their second home, 525 East Masterson Avenue, north of the beautiful St. Peter's Square, National Register of Historic Places designated Catholic Church and associated buildings, still stands. This is the Google Maps story picture. but it's dilapidated. We must remember when he lived and worked here. The US Congress passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and did not add the Fair Housing Act until 1968, when the Gibsons were back in Indianapolis. Maureen Grinsfelder, whose parents were personal friends with Alvin Strauss and his wife, known as Billy, told me she has wondered why Strauss would have hired Gibson, which would have been, she said, radical at the time. She and Alan go back to his talent, which would have been apparent at the time he was hired, and the business abilities he brought to the firm as confirmation of Strauss's reasoning behind the hire. It was a good hire. Gibson's contribution to the Strauss firm were significant, Grinsfelder said. First were his design capabilities. Beyond that, Grinsfelder said, quote, he was a good person working with clients. He could meet with clients. He was a very positive person, more so than some of the other partners who were more engineers and more introverts. He had a good role. So Gibson got off to the right kind of start here. While he was here, he demonstrated all the strengths that he took with him to Indianapolis and created his successful career on his own there. So now I think it is time to turn to Buildings by Edwin Gibson in Fort Wayne. Now we turn from biography to architecture. And there are several people in this room who can help me with architecture words because that's what I am weakest on. So please feel free to jump in when I am talking about it in my words, and there's actually a precise word that would describe it better, okay? First of all, records identify most, if not all, projects that came through the firm as A.M. Strauss Associates designs. So what I have been able to do here is, with Alan's help, identify these several buildings that we know for sure Gibson designed. So here we go. Here's the list we're going to talk about today. The asterisks are because with some of these great big projects, we're not saying that the entire design was all Edwin Gibson, but he worked on these, okay? So it's Parkview, the IPFW campus site plan, and the first buildings, including Kettler Hall, the Benai Jacob Synagogue, Akduth Sholem Temple, 1208 Delta Boulevard, which is a very fascinating property, 4625 North Washington Road, and 3541 South Washington Road. First of all, Parkview Hospital. This is the original Randalia campus we're talking about. I do not have a picture because none of the pictures I have help at all to sort out what was their first, second, third, and fourth, because it's a hospital and it's been added to and added to and added to. So many of the additions were also Strauss designs, but they came after. Plans in the Strauss archive are dated from 1951 through 1968, and Gibson was available to work on them until 1963. So here's the best I can say. We're all familiar with what it looks like today. So let's just use this general modernity as a jumping off point for the rest of what we're going to look at today. We move on to Kettler Hall on the IPFW campus. Grinsfelder told me he remembers working with Gibson on the original site plan for the IPFW campus and on the design of the first building, Kettler Hall, which opened September 17, 1964. Plans in the Strauss archive for, quote, Indiana Purdue Foundation, new educational building, are dated 1962. Excuse me, Kettler is an international style building. Others will argue largely because of this canopy over the entryway and the grid there, that mid-century modern would be a perfectly good description also. And in its design, we can see some of the touches we will come to recognize in other Gibson designs. So I call your attention to that metal lattice work up above the main entrance and the original double hung and fixed 1/1 windows that are in grid patterns and have the granite spandrels between the floors. Additionally, look at the picture in the bottom corner of the screen when I say this. Despite Kettler Hall's considerable size, visually, I would argue that its masses form long and low shapes with wings off a central core. It could have been a skyscraper, which is what Neff Hall became several years later. But instead, Kettler Hall settles down into what has become the most forested edge of the campus. So I think it emphasizes the horizontal. And it has the grid and the lattice work. Okay. Just take a cleansing breath and enjoy this view. Alan and Maureen agree Ed Gibson designed this building, and it is a good guide to his aesthetic. It emphasizes the horizontal and uses the aesthetic of light and shade, going back and forth to define spaces. The Indiana Historic Sites and Structures Inventory in its Shard database online calls this building an excellent example of modernist architecture. The surveyor called attention to the projecting wing of the facade has a corner window unit with narrow columns of metal sash windows with fixed sashes and colored glass. This unit wraps around to the south side of the projecting wing. A short wing in the L of the facade has 3 columns of colored glass windows at the north end. The main entrance to the building is located to the south side of the projecting wing. We can see that south side here. A short wing in the L facade has, okay, 3 pairs of metal glazed doors are topped by narrow columns of windows that go almost to the eaves. To the south is a shorter wing with a centered grouping of 7 columns of windows. The south elevation has a group of windows with 4 columns with 5 lights each of the center of the elevation. The west end of the elevation has a large grouping of 12 columns of windows with 5 lights each. Below this unit is a door to access the lower level of the wing. On the north elevation, the original building has a large window unit with 6 columns of colored glass windows. To the west are 2 sets of metal doors to a loading dock. On the addition, the north elevation has 9 evenly spaced columns of windows, each with 10 stacked lights. That's a lot of stacks and lights and elevations. So use that cleansing breath to let your attention just go to the way Gibson uses patterns that he manipulates. And remember that mention of metal glazed doors. Also note the way he lays out the masses of the buildings, letting them glide over the contours of the property and setting them at angles to create interest and define his interior and the exterior spaces. This is a fascinating building, even though it's really not that big. Now we go to a much larger building, more complicated story. This is the Akduth Sholem Temple at 5200 Old Mill Road. The Strauss firm records have multiple projects involving this property, and it now has parts that were designed by other architects, and it also is architecture is the art we all live in, so it is an art in itself. And this piece of art was designed to house and make use of the work of other artists. Like the stained glass windows in the sanctuary are the work of another artist, but yet they're integral to that space. So those 2 art forms are working together there. So this is a really very complex work of art because it's incorporating other artists' views and visions and everything. Alan told me he remembered Gibson working on a temple project in 1961. Congregation Akduth Sholem is the oldest Jewish congregation west of the Alleghenies, and Alvin Strauss was a member, as were several of his and Gibson's clients. This modern style building faces the southernmost stretch of Old Mill Road across a wide lawn, and it backs up to Foster Park. I am struck personally, let me point this out to you, but well, you can see it, by the dark brown by the book-like look of the dark brown facade that projects upward from the front roof line and with the pattern designed into it. I think it's a muted but very meaningful use of pattern. And as I pointed out, the dramatic colored glass windows in the sanctuary that are the other artists' work incorporated into the larger architectural artwork depict the epic of the Jewish people. They tell a story. So this building was built over time. It includes, Strauss work, Gibson work, and the work of other architects. And it also tells the story of the congregation and the people who use it. So this is a piece of architecture that is telling a lot of things when you look at it and you use it. Now now we're going to talk about the Gibson houses, which are fun because they're houses and we all think it's easy to think about houses, I think. But when we are talking about these, we're going to see a little bit more detail. There are some things about them that are more interesting. We're going to see the Frank Lloyd Wright interest very clearly, and we'll also see Gibson's aesthetic in practice here. We're going to go first to 1208 Delta Boulevard because it's just a fascinating and unusual option. I'm starting out showing you the site plan that's up in the upper right-hand corner there because you need to understand that to be able to look at the pictures next. The official address of this house is 1208 Delta Boulevard, which means its official front door is here. But it's a duplex. So it also has a 1411 Edgewater address and a beautiful facade and front of the house view over here. Jack and Hazel Golden were living here at 1204 Delta Boulevard when they had 1208 built and then moved next door. So I think, I don't know, zoning and planning were different then, so maybe it's easier to pull this off, wait till you see the picture, but that helped it happen. He owned the House of Golden women's clothing store at 121 East Wayne Street. And I found a picture of that to show you. So that's kind of his aesthetic. So there's how it sits on the ground. That's Delta Boulevard because it's the little Delta Lake that's south of Columbia when you're going around and swinging up to join Lake Avenue. So now you're placed. Now let's look at the pictures. The little one on the bottom is the front of 1208 Delta Boulevard. But in the back, it's got more decks but it's everything the Goldens wanted. You remember that. The bigger picture is the front of the 1411 Edgewater side of it. I had never paid attention to this house. Alan told me about it. I went there and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've never paid attention to this house before. So I started on a long project of figuring it out. And it wasn't until I realized that the 1208 Delta was the kind of the official taxing address of it, and that was what got it started. Then I was able to find it in the records and understand it better. But this is an unusual building. I think as you look at it, both from the Delta Boulevard side and from the Edgewater side, you've got to realize that it undoubtedly was designed with an idea to take advantage of the river views. Because look at all the up high outdoor spaces where you can see the river. Even when this house was built in 1949, there were some dikes there. So you needed to be up a little bit to see over the dikes into the river. Now the dikes are higher, so I'm presuming these dikes, at least the upper ones, are still high enough you can still see the river, which would be nice. Okay. I'm getting my pages right. Okay. Okay, the first people to live at 1411 were Harry and Velma Daniel. And he was the president of Daniel Brothers, Inc., a wholesale meat company at 127 West Columbia. This house also has terraces on the private side, on the inside of the lot. So it's really very much bringing the outside in. And I think the use of the rough stone on the porches and on that chimney column is another reminder, nature, and the outside in. This house is designed very much to, even though it's weirdly crowded onto that city lot, I think you'd feel very much, comfortable and with the nature that you do have around you when you're in it and at it, which is a very nice achievement. I know who owns the house now. I have not been able to attract her attention sufficiently to talk to me yet, but I'm working on it. So I'm hoping to get more information about this house as we go on. Here is a house that I have been able to talk to the homeowner, 4625 North Washington Road. He and his wife love it. And you can see why. It's got a beautiful enclosed terrace in an L of the house. accessible with big sliding doors from two parts of the house. This is where Dr. J-Rex Parent lives, and this was built for Haskell and Hazel Schultz. Haskell was the head of the safety cab company. This 1957 house also brings the outside in, with a terrace in the L at the back of the house's two main wings. Notice that, importantly, the current homeowner has capitalized on this outside in quality by planting a screen of evergreens that you can see to the left of the top picture, which have grown into a lovely backdrop for this terrace. Its original entrance doors were metal, Dr. Parent tells me. So remember Benai Jacob, which has the metal entrance doors, though they have been replaced. It also has an interior lattice screening the entry area from the living room, something, once again, I'm coming to recognize as an Ed Gibson signature touch. Dr. Parent also told me that they added the shutters on the windows, so they thought it looked nice. But once again, long, low, the masses and the fit into the landscape. So here we go for one more house. This is 3541 South Washington Road. This was on the 2012 Arch Home and Garden Tour when it was in Wildwood Park. But, and this is the picture that was in our brochure then, this is the Lawrence and Marjorie Levy house, circa 1949 house. Lawrence Levy had a real estate firm and Marjorie was vice president of the Ball Drug Service. This house, we noted, had many of the characteristics of the Usonian style. It's got flat roofs with deep overhangs. It's built of natural materials. It has large windows. It's a single story in height and has that integral garden terrace in an L. It uses Indiana limestone and redwood inside and out with very little plaster or ordinary walls in it. Interestingly, when the Levy family had moved into the house in 1950, it was featured in this two-page spread of pictures and ads in the News Sentinel. The date is June 17, 1950. Sadly, it mentions that there is an architect whom Mrs. Levy, quote, worked with to moderate his designs for the interior, and then decided she regretted having moderated it because it was really neat once you were living in it. So we live and learn. But it talks about the uses of grays and beiges and tans and accents of chartreuse and teal and orange and that sort of stuff. So it looks really fun. But we'll see these. This is from the microfilm when I went back and found it, and it's not good. But you can see that there's a lattice and walls of windows. Charlotte Charay lived in the house from 1983 to 1992, raising her family there. And she shared, she's a realtor, and she shared the MLS photos from the 2005 listing for it with me. So we can really see this house. Here's the front door on the top, and then you turn around and the lattice is repeated as a divider between the entryway and the living room area. Beautiful light in the house. The fireplace area is not Indiana limestone. It is Tennessee crab orchard stone, which is a special kind of stone. And the house has that living room, which has a little notch, and then there's the dining room area, has a planter in it. The picture on the right, the door at the back goes to the kitchen. But look at that wall of windows and the big beamed ceiling. There's the kitchen and looking out the door toward the, I don't know, that may go into one of the other rooms, not one of the hobby rooms or something. And there's out onto the deck, onto the terrace. There's the terrace with a water feature in it. The big doors go into the dining room and the living area and the living area, and then the smaller doors go into the kitchen. Gibson designed his houses with hobby rooms and rooms that were designed to be offices, and had cabinets where you could hide a television and your movie camera and projector and all of that. So that's probably what the picture on the left is. And the windows always overlooked the terrace so you could watch your children playing. One of the things that Charlotte Charay remembers most fondly about this house is the built-ins. Everything from closets to, well, mostly closets, but this is the master bedroom with its corner of windows. And this hallway went down the wing with the master bedroom off of it, and at the far end is another signature thing, maybe not just Gibson, maybe from that time period, because I actually lived in a Jack Worthman house that had a bedroom like this. It's a bedroom that's a mirror image, and it has a folding door. It was leather in this house. You could pull up to give each child privacy while they slept. And that's what that room at the far end of the hallway is. And along that was the master bedroom and then the other bedrooms, and then the hallway that you see below that hall, and then a secondary hallway you see there that is lined with closets, and then another door that goes down to the basement of the house, and the door out to the garage. Charlotte said that one of the striking things about this house is that all the cabinetry, all the doors, all the everything was what she called commercial grade. Everything was heavy duty, made to last, you know, just beautiful. She raved about it. She really loved this house. It had many built-ins. Okay. Now then, as if those houses and buildings aren't reason enough to really be an Edwin Gibson fan, I've got one more that really pleased me when I discovered it. Space recapture. Edwin Gibson was a historic preservationist. This little brochure is in the materials at the Ball State Archive. Space recapture is Ed Gibson and Associates, quote unquote, exclusive term for the recycling of structurally sound buildings that would otherwise be abandoned or demolished. They argue that it saves time, saves money, that it is doing environmental conservation, and it provides building security, which I read their reasoning for that, and I'm not really sure what they mean by that, but they provided building security to them. And he closed down his firm in 1987 and became Methodist Hospital's head of building and planning for building. So for him to be pitching this, you know, in probably late 70s, you know, mid 80s, I think is just remarkable. It's wonderful. I'm so glad that he figured that out and was making the same argument that people like Donovan Ripkema are making today about why historic preservation makes sense in the real estate market. He was doing it then using the same logic. And, you know, I look at this brochure, you know, the stamp folds open, then it folds down. It's got all the little reasons down in it. And it's obviously done pre-desktop publishing, and it's just really charming. So this is a quote from it that I think is really good. Because of old age, many sound buildings of landmark value yield to expensive towers of concrete and glass. As architects, we applaud these new monuments to man's ability of design. We also respect and admire the beautiful architecture of older buildings which remain strong and usable. So you rock, Edwin A. Gibson, in my book. My quest to learn more about Edwin Gibson is continuing. I think I'm off to a good start. So if anyone who either attends or views this lecture either knows anything or knows anyone who knows anything about Edwin Gibson or an Edwin Gibson house or building, please contact me so I can learn more from you. I'm going on learning more about him and his work. Let me again thank the people who have made this possible, our funders and our members and donors. This is important work, and we do it with the help of our village. And thanks again to the sources of information and the people who helped me. Let me remind the people who are streaming once again, find that Q&A button on your screen and get ready to use it, because we're going to be going into the Q&A session right now. Anybody have questions, comments, additions, things you want to tell me I can do better? Thank you very much. Al. Is the Levy house located in the southeast corner of Hawthorne and South Washington, or is it east of that location? You know? He's asking for the precise location of the Levy house, and I'm going to have to say I don't have a Google map of it in my house. I'm not sure which corner it's on. I don't think it's on a corner, to be honest. Okay. Pardon me? I'm having another knowledgeable person over here say northeast. Oh, the northeast, okay. Okay. It sits up above the street, yes. Okay. Another question, comment? Yes. Yes. And I think she's the only one that has the plans, because I found listings for, okay. The question here is telling me that the current owner of the Golden House, the 1208 Delta Boulevard house, does have the plans. And that sounds logical to me, because those plans are not listed in the Strauss archive of Ball State, though the others are. So yes, I'm not going to stop trying to get in touch with her so I can see those. Right. Very excited about it. Excellent. Good to hear. It's certainly a fascinating house, well worth being loved. Okay, we have a question coming to us from the Zoom. You're going to be able to find a list of this list on the Arch website as soon as we get the recording posted next week. And we will continue working on that. By later this year, an official Edwin A. Gibson resource page will go up under resources on Arch's website, and it will have the best list we can have at that time of what we have found to be his work. That is, you can go to Ball State's Seeger archive and get the list of his work statewide, but that is all from his firm, which was in Indianapolis, which is after Fort Wayne. There are a few Fort Wayne projects on that list, but it doesn't include this early stuff. So I'm trying to fill in the early stuff with this work. Now, well, that list is going to be key to the work we do. Yes. Just an observation. You alluded to the fact that the temple, the dark brown column, kind of looks like book. And of course, I usually thought Torah. Don't know whether there was an intentional.
Balance the Ten Commandments.
The Ten Commandments. Oh.
It's decorated. Those are panels decorated with bronze letters, and the letters are Hebrew letters, and they represent the numbers 1 through 10 in the Hebrew language. They couldn't recall the commandments.
Right, right. Okay. Let me recreate this for the recording. The question was more an observation about my sense of the book-like nature of that brown, ascending facade element on the Akduth V'Sholem temple. And I'm told by a temple member here that it is actually a reference to the 10 Commandments, and that those areas on it are the Hebrew letters 1 through 10 for the 10 Commandments, referring to that. So my instinct was going the right direction. Thank you very much. It's so important to look at architecture realizing that it's the art we live in, and that it's not only creating spaces, and it's certainly far more than utilitarian. Remember that it can include stories, and it can include, it always includes cultural references, and that it's part of our lives and defines our lives. And I think that's a really good example of how architecture can do that.
I think it might be interesting to note too that we recently discovered a staff person at the State Historic Preservation Office website based in Los Angeles, with Paul Revere Williams, a very prominent Black architect based in Los Angeles, did one house here in Fort Wayne. Yes,
okay, I'll repeat that. Through our contacts at the state level, we have recently learned that there is a house in Fort Wayne designed by Paul Revere Williams, another historic Black architect of a national stature. He was based in Los Angeles. And so we are catching up to that one too. It has been surveyed on our historic resources survey, but it was not given, I don't think it's proper due, so we're going to be going back over that one. Right. And it's another modernist ranch, horizontal kind of house. So we have some rich resources here, and we've been touched by a lot of talented architects. Edwin Gibson being a leader among them. Okay, well, I'm going to say thank you all very much. Thank you to the people who have joined us by Zoom, and thank you to the people who will be looking at this in the future as a recording. We are glad to be here. This is the first 2022 lecture on the Arch Fun and Free Lecture Series, and we're so glad you were able to be with us today. Thank you all.